Welcome everybody to PinstripeChronicles podcast. I'm Tats, here with Donald and Rob, and we're going to bring something a little different to you today. We have a list that we each had made individually of 5 players that we would have traded to improve the team going forward.
So, did you say we're going to do something a little different to you right there? I mean, it could be for you. To you sounds a little aggressive.
Yeah,
we're doing something a little different to you.
Yeah, I said what I said.
I said what I said. There we go.
Listen, this thing of ours, we don't.
This thing of ours, that's right. So, Donald, do you want to go with your first pick?
Okay, so my first pick to be traded is Gary Sanchez. El Gary, Rob's favorite catcher. I'm ready to move on from him. People say that, look at his offensive numbers or whatever like that. You don't really need to worry about replacing his production. His production isn't actually that great. Defensively, he is one of the very worst defensive catchers in all of baseball. He ranks there. In fact, I believe there was a ranking last year where he was ranked at least the second worst, if not the worst. So it's time to move on. I think that if you've brought in a catcher who's more defensive-minded, I'm not saying Higashioka. Higashioka is a backup. But I think we can bring in somebody to. Also, the reason why is because they don't trust him in the playoffs, and if the best pitchers don't trust him, such as Garrett Cole, and our number 2 starter last year was Kluber, he didn't trust him either.
Yeah.
So if your best pitchers don't trust him, Aaron Boone doesn't really trust him because he would have played him in the playoffs otherwise. So they can't just continue this scenario where they just keep rolling it back, thinking that his value is suddenly going to improve. They killed his value. They had plenty of opportunities to trade him. They didn't take that opportunity. I believe they could have traded him for Real Muto at one point a couple of years ago, but they didn't do it. And now we're left with his albatross, whereas the arbitration keeps going up and up and up. It'd be very difficult to trade him. I'm not sure what you could get for him. I'm hoping now with the universal DH that a team would be maybe more interested in him as the part-time catcher where he could DH the rest of the time. That would be a scenario. That would be an argument for the Yankees, but the Yankees have DH pretty much tied up. So that doesn't make sense for me. I would look to get rid of that contract and improve. So that's my number 1, get rid of Gary Sanchez. Reason why, case in point, that Mets game. I will never forget him for that.
Yeah, that's going to... The other thing with Gary that stands out amongst fans is the pass ball that let the player score from second.
Oh yeah,
that was a rough one to watch.
Do I need to go get that ball? Yeah, it's okay.
So, Rob, who's your first pick?
Oh, I'm going from my most likely to least likely, I guess. So my most obvious pick is Luke Voit. You have to trade him, especially if all these rumors about us looking at first baseman are true. He's got no spot on this team. I mean, he's not playing first. He's not going to DH, but Stanton there and the potential of a rotating outfield. Voigt's a good hitter when healthy. He's not a terrible defender. He's just not going to win you a Gold Glove or any awards. And now, again, just mentioned with Sanchez, with the National League getting the DH this year eventually, he's got plenty of options now to play elsewhere. It just doesn't make sense to keep him. We know he's definitely still salty about how the thing with Rizzo went last year. And I just think it's, it's time to move on from him. Thing is, I was thinking about it yesterday. If he was a lefty, we'd be screaming to keep this guy on the team because of the potential to hit like 70 home runs. But I think especially because of these rumors about Freeman that have come out recently and before the lockout, and then the trade rumors about Olsen, and it's always the potential of Rizzo coming back, and even the talk about LeMahieu playing first. So I think Luke Voit you kind of have to move on at this point.
All right. So my first pick was Aroldis Chapman, and I'm saying that because while he's still effective and can save games, when he goes into those slumps and those mental lapses that it seems like each year they're lasting longer and longer, And I think now's the time to cut the cord and see if you can get, what you can get for him, because you also, and we still have Green and or Loizaga to fill that role. That I think they could be effective closers. I think Green's experience, and he has closed games for us before. I think he would fit that role. And Loizaga, if he only has to worry about that one inning, I think you would see a lot of improvement with his command, because he'll just be able to just let it fly. He's not trying to figure out, trying to navigate, keep a little, gas in the tank in case they want to go a second inning with him. He'll be that guy, and I think that would elevate his game. So that Waldis Chapman was my first choice. All right, Donald, number two.
My number two would be, it's a tight one, but I'm going to go with Gleyber Torres. Gleyber Torres is my second choice to be traded. The reason why I'm going with him is, even though he's obviously an incredibly talented player, and obviously a couple of years ago, if you asked me the same question, I would be like, are you kidding me? This is insane. But now we're in a situation, and a lot of this is the Yankees doing. It's not necessarily Gleyber Torres doing. But there is not a scenario where Gleyber Torres is the best infielder for his position. So there is not a scenario where he'd be the best second baseman, because DJ LeMahieu is the best second baseman in the infield. There's not even a situation where you could possibly even dream of putting him back in shortstop. In fact, we'd be better with a potted plant playing shortstop than Gleyber Torres at this stage. So
that's rough.
So at this stage, you're asking him to be a backup second baseman, because I don't really want DJ LeMahieu to be playing as well. Let's look at the DJ LeMahieu, because you have to trade either one of the two, right? So DJ LeMahieu gives you more times than not a 300 batting average and a guy that's top of the order, and clutch hitting, which we don't really have. So I like that. And also gives you adaptability. He can play you first, he can play third, he can play short. He's too good an infielder to just be a backup, and he's too good a bat to be a backup. So I think you have to have him starting in the infield. You don't want him starting first base, because you need power from the left side. You need some power and productivity from first base. We've not been getting that in a long time. So we need to be upgrading first base. The other alternative is you send him to third base. But you can't really send him to third base either, because third base is actually his third best position. I don't want DJ LeMahieu playing his third best position in the infield.
Yeah.
His best position is second base. So that leaves Gleyber Torres. Gleyber Torres, he has real issues in terms of motivation. It's kind of like Robinson Cano, where he just kind of lollygags it around. And there's not a Derek Jeter in our clubhouse to pull him in line. So Aaron Judge is the closest you're going to get. There's not a Joe Torre as a manager to hold him to account. We don't have any coach that holds anybody to account. So that's why we need to move on from guys that have that kind of personality. So number one was Gary Sanchez, but even lazier than Gary Sanchez is, in fact, Gleyber Torres. So Gleyber Torres is my second choice to be traded. You're going to get a little bit of value for him. I do believe you can get a prospect and maybe a pitching prospect and move on. There's not a scenario where he's suddenly going to become what you need from him. He doesn't provide power. The Yankees need power. He's not that type of guy. He had that 1 year where he hit the 30-odd home runs. That was awesome. But I think he's more of a line drive hitter. But the Yankees don't really value that. And so while the Yankees are going down this current path where it's all metrics and exit velo, I don't think Gleyber Torres really fits that. He's struggled with that adaptation. So I move on from him.
All right, Rob, you're number two.
I got Gio Urshela. I think, again, it goes back to the rumors. If they're going to get a first baseman, that means they're not moving on from Torres. I just don't see them doing it. I think with Gio being closer to 30, he's got 2 years left of arbitration. He's been solid since we got him. Teams know what they're going to get with Gio Urshela. You trade for Gio, you know what you're getting. You don't really know what you're getting with Gleyber Torres. That's why I think it's easier to move Gio. I just think that there's too many signs pointing that they have to move in an infielder. You know, if they add a shortstop, whether it's a stopgap and if they get a first baseman, DJ's probably playing third. You know, that's just the way it's pointing to that. You know, I just don't see them moving on from Glaber. So I think Gio kind of falls out of the shuffle there because they're not going to bench Torres. And if they don't trade him, what do you do with him? You can't they're not going to send him down at this point. But Gio, you're not going to re-sign him with the 18 infielders you have in your minor league system. So you have to pick one out of the two. And I think that they're more likely going to move the guy who has only 2 years left, aside from Torres, who's got like 4, I think. So I think it comes down to how many years of control and who's probably the better fit to trade at the moment. And I believe, in my opinion, that's Gio Urshela.
So, Rob, I'm going down the path of who I think could be traded. I don't actually think Torres or Sanchez will be traded. But I'm thinking of who I want to be traded. So who's it that you want to be traded? Do you want him above all infielders to be traded?
I don't want to trade anybody on this infield because it's weak as it is. You know, like right now, I don't want to trade Torres because he's got way too much potential to move from, especially when his value's down. You don't move a player when his value's down. Just like, let's get rid of him to get what we can get.
Well, how would you get his value up, bro? If he's not the best second baseman, he's a terrible shortstop, and he's not going to be a backup infielder, where can you use him?
Put him at second. I'm fine with LeMahieu at third. I don't think that he's terrible third baseman. We saw it last year. He can handle it just fine. I do not want LeMahieu at first, not while he's still got the ability to play a solid infield. I don't want LeMahieu at first.
Would you not agree that it's his third best position, though?
Well, what backs that up? Just the simple metrics backs that up.
Well, yeah, I mean, he's a better first baseman than he is a third baseman. I'm pretty confident.
Well, it's easier to play first than it is to play third. I mean, let's be honest here. They call it the hot for a reason. I don't think he's bad though. Like, do the metrics say that he's a terrible third baseman? I don't think so. I think he was fine. You look at we talk about the eye test a lot, right?
Yeah.
LeMahieu was fine at third base last year. He wasn't the greatest third baseman. He wasn't A-Rod level third base. He wasn't
Urshela level.
He wasn't Urshela level, right? But he did the job. And I think, again, there's too many signs pointing to that's where he's going to be next year, especially if Glaber's here, because you're not putting Glaber back at short. You just can't, like you said, you cannot put him back at shortstop.
Yeah, I think with Urshela, and we talked about it in a previous show, that the reason that, what makes him expendable is the fact that he's on, his value is still high. His batting average kind of dropped a little bit. Did we see that, was Urshela just a flash in the pan that year with the bat? Can he get that bat back? But we do know that when he's playing, when he's on the field, he's A+. He's very underrated amongst a lot of the third basemen. I think he's one of the better third basemen in the game right now. So
yeah, and it's crazy because the metrics only say he's average, but the eye test for me, he's a phenomenal third baseman.
Exactly. Well, that's why sometimes you can't look solely at the numbers. You have to, go back and watch some film and look at, just his instinct on the field.
Another thing that makes me pro Urshela and against trading him is what he brings to the clubhouse. I mean, he brings that I'm going to give it every single day mentality. He plays hard every single day, which Torres doesn't, Sanchez doesn't, Hicks doesn't even play. But, I mean, remember, Urshela did that diving play into the stands like Derek Jeter. That's the kind of mentality you want. There's not enough Yankee players like that. For me, I would be very hesitant to trade that. But I do agree with Rob that if there was an infielder that will be traded, you would think it's probably going to be him, unless they move him to shortstop, because the Yankees only look at the stat sheet. They don't look at the eye test.
Yeah. All right. Well, my number 2 is also like Donald. I have Torres down. And the reason I do is because we have Cashman's very high on Volpe and Peraza. And mixed with DJ needing to stay at second base, there's nowhere really for Torres to play. And even though he had a down year, I think we've seen enough from Torres that clubs would also be confident that he can be a good fit in a clubhouse, and he can help a team improve if he's able to get a second base position. So I think that's why teams would be more willing to make a deal on Torres, just because when they could look at the season that he played at second, just because he was drafted as a shortstop, like we've talked about, doesn't mean that that's the position that he has to stay at. So if they're able to move him to a team that needs has a hole at second base, I think a lot of teams would bite on Torres because of his ability to put the bat on the ball as well. And I don't think this 1 year is going to really devalue him as much as we think it would. That's why I had Torres as my second. And also because I'd be very hesitant to move Urshela because of his level of defense. And like we argued, like we talked about, is he may be having a down year with his bat, but there's still enough people in that lineup with a bat to pick up that part of the lineup.
Even at worst, he could spell people at short or third.
Yeah.
He's not going to be a type of guy that demands to play 162 games a year. He's not, he doesn't demand to be a starter. You could have him in a role where he could back up DJ, back up short, anything like that. Even if we signed somebody, say for instance, we brought in Dalton Simmons. We had him as a shortstop, and Urshela kind of spelled time with him. You're still getting a very good defensive player there. So I think that Urshela has more value as a part-time starter and a backup than what Torres would.
That's why I think Torres would be, I think it'd be easier to move than we're most fans are thinking because of just our last impression of him. But I think if you look at his overall body of work, I think he would be, a team would jump at the chance, especially with, still all the years of control.
Yeah.
That also increases his value. So, Donald, you're number 3.
Like Tats, my number 3 will be Aroldis Chapman. Now, there's probably guys that I would prefer to have traded above him, but the thing is, I can't overlook the fact that we've actually got a better closer already in our bullpen, and Loaizaga, that's ready to step into the role. Loaiza's very cool, calm, and collected, and he's not prone to meltdowns. And that's the problem with Chapman. You can't trust that what Chapman's going to turn up, because every single season now, without fail, since we brought him back from the Cubs, he has these meltdowns, and it's usually exactly the same stage, round about the All-Star break, pre-All-Star break, and right through till around about September, till he kind of figures it out again. Before then, he's unhittable. He will have a 0.00 ERA for about 2-3 months, and you're thinking, "Oh my God, this guy is unbelievable." And then you're already hearing stupid comparisons. He's the next Mariano Rivera, blah blah blah. And then he just melts down, and then he's got like a 15 ERA for the next 2 months. And then Boone doesn't trust him. Nobody trusts him, and he implodes every single game. And frankly, as bad as we were, had he not had that meltdown, the Yankees win the division. That's just probably a fact. Well, they certainly get the very first wild card. There's not a question about that. So you can't just keep trusting that. And the great thing about trading Chapman is, Hal Steinbrenner is obsessed with the luxury tax. So then you free up a bunch of money to put into another position that's more valuable, because we've already got a ready-made closer. And then there's also a bunch of teams that desperately need a closer. I can name at least half a dozen right now in the National League that would love a closer like Aroldis Chapman to help them out. So will they be willing to eat the money? Then I doubt, because he's due quite a lot. But if you work out a deal where, we maybe take back a lesser prospect, but they take back majority of the salary, you can work something out, get some cap relief there, because we are working under a cap for some reason. Yeah. And then we move on with Loaizaga. We've got Chad Green, that's a very solid middle reliever. I don't like him as a setup guy, but I like him as a middle reliever to eat in innings. And in free agency, we'll find perfectly good value for setup men. There's perfectly good value there. There will be in free agency. We already saw it when we brought in O'Day. If O'Day didn't get hurt, O'Day would have been one of our best relievers. He did a very good job until he got hurt. So when we signed him for nothing. So you're going to get value in free agency. Move on from Aroldis Chapman. I don't really care what you get necessarily. I just want some money off the books and to put it into other positions that we need. And just get that mentality out of there. I mean, at the end of the day, he chokes in the biggest spots. He's choked a number of games now in the most important games. We can't just keep rolling that out there. I don't have a personal vendetta against Chapman.
No.
I think he's a very good pitcher. In fact, no, I'm going to say he's a very good thrower. He throws hard, and it's awesome to watch, but he's not a great pitcher. He's not a great thinking pitcher. It's just fastball, occasional slider over the plate, home run. You can't really trust that. I'm ready to move on.
All right, Rob, you're number 3.
Gary Sanchez. It's painful, but you have to move on. It's the last year of his deal. They ruined the guy, you know. And it's not even the whole one knee down thing, because plenty of catchers in the past, Tony Pena is the one who brought that up, you know, like the whole one knee down thing. Even Jason Varitek has been pro with that stance. He's defended it. I don't think that was necessarily the issue. It's just you see the difference from when Girardi and Pena were there to Boone. It's like he just became too relaxed, you know, and that's kind of the issue with the whole clubhouse. It's like everyone just seems very, very relaxed in what they're doing. And you saw a different Gary Sanchez. 2017, you're looking at everyone, you know, defense aside, you're like, this is the next great Yankee catcher. He's going to be here for, you know, 10, 15 years. He's going to hit 30 plus home runs. He's going to drive in a ton of runs. He's going to play good enough behind the plate that you're going to forgive it because of how good his bat is. And then he had an injury in 2018, but then you just see like he just got progressively worse. I don't care what Cashman says. He got progressively worse behind the plate. And it's just like, I love Gary Sanchez. I want him to be here, but you're not going to re-sign him. There's no chance they re-sign him after this year. So if the catcher position is the one where you say, who cares about the numbers offensively? We simply need defense. Then you have to go with some platoon of Higashioka and another defensive-minded catcher. I think at this point it's just needed because you can't keep doing it. It's like what Donald said earlier. If you don't trust him in a one-game playoff with your number one pitcher, you can't go into the season and say he's the starter. You know, you can say we're going to platoon him and Higashioka, but then it's the same thing as last year because one of them's going to get hot for a week, and then you're going to have to sit him because the catcher position is very demanding. So it's like it's such a tricky situation. That's why I think you kind of have to move on and hope that he finds success elsewhere for at least for the last year of his contract, and then he'll get a payday elsewhere, and you just kind of have to admit your mistakes as an organization because you ruined them, you know, and they did it with a lot of players. They ruined Gary Sanchez. He had the potential to be, and he still is a good offensive player. You know, average doesn't tell you that, but he's still got the power. He's still going to drive in runs, but he has certainly declined from what he once was when he came up, especially from when he came up. The first year and a half of his career, he was outstanding, you know, and then you just see
he was
like
he had like Piazza numbers.
Yeah, he 100%. Was 2016. He almost won Rookie of the Year for half a season. Like you don't see that. You know, that's how arguable. Yeah, that's how good he was. And then he backed it up again the next year. He was fantastic. And you know, then we just see too much up and down from him to be like, yeah, that's the catcher. You know, so but unfortunately, they kind of missed their window to add that catcher in the offseason. They missed their window on a lot of things. So it's kind of just, do you go with a Rob Brantley type, just to spell a left-handed bat and have that platoon at catcher? I don't know, but I think they have to look elsewhere for catcher because there's just still too much seesawing with what every offseason they say something different about Gary, you know? So I think it is time to Let the birdie fly. Sorry, Gary.
No, exactly. I completely agree with you. I think that I don't even blame Gary that much. He is what he is. He's kind of a guy who is a little bit more relaxed in terms of mentality, but I think he's quite sensitive to criticism, and you've seen that before. And I think the Yankees have messed his brain up. They've asked him to take on all these different approaches, and it's messed up his style. When we spoke to Ron Blomberg, he said that he thought that he was one of the best guys coming up from the system in terms of pure hitting. He was able to hit to all fields. But the Yankees have focused purely on exit velo, like they did with Gleyber Torres, and they're only thinking about the stats. And when you do that, they've changed their approach. And I think Gary Sanchez is now a broken hitter. He's also got all these different things to worry about because Tanner Swanson is making him do the one leg up thing. That's obviously been really heavily pushed by Tanner Swanson, the new catching coach. So that is where we're at. I don't necessarily blame him. I blame the organization. I blame the organization for Gleyber Torres as well. And arguably Chapman. I don't think we should have brought Chapman back after once his contract expired. Re-signing him, I think, was a huge mistake. I don't know if you guys agree with that, but I think that not necessarily after the Cubs, but when his contract expired after that, then
the second contract.
Second contract, I completely disagree with bringing him back. I thought we got lucky that his contract expired when it did, and we should have moved on, but we didn't. And now we've been stuck in this situation with him. Gleyber, they messed up in very same ways they messed up Gary. So my wanting to trade these guys is not a personal attack on them or their ability. I don't love their mentality, but the Yankees have fed that mentality because that's the mentality they preach in the clubhouse, this chilled stuff. And I think the Yankees have just messed up with their approach offensively and defensively. Gleyber was an excellent second baseman. They moved him to short. Now he's broken. Gary Sanchez was an average defender, an awesome hitter, and then they messed around. Now he's a broken defender and an average hitter. So it's all of the Yankee organization.
Well, which leads me to my number three, and my number three is actually Davy Garcia. I think ever since that postseason game, I think his head's just not in it right now. He still has the ability to be a very solid middle rotation, like a 4 or a 5, some more back end rotation. And I think on another team that has less pressure on it, I think he can mentally get back to where he needs to be. And if the longer the Yankees hold on to him, they've already shown that they didn't trust him in that postseason game when they bring in Hat. I think, and that was something when we first started this show, the early years, we talked about that almost every episode.
It's been a while since you brought it up.
Yeah. So, if he's going on the trade block, we gotta bring it up one more time. But
disgusting.
That was terrible. And I just think, the Yankees again misused the player and broke the player. And for Garcia's sake, he was my third pick to go on to be traded.
Good cool, bro.
All right, Donald, number 4.
And number 4, I'm gonna go with actually in your wavelength. I'm gonna go Clark Schmidt. The reason why I say Clark Schmidt is because the same reason as you David Garcia. What was Clark Schmidt's very first appearance? Mid relief in a bases loaded situation. Aaron Boone didn't trust him to start. He put him in the middle relief situation.
Well, can you use the other logic that he was so confident in Schmidt that you felt that even in that situation, that
no, because it was a no-win scenario. It was a no-win scenario for Clark Schmidt. If he gave up a couple of hits and the runs piled in, what an awful situation for a starter. Remember, he's not a reliever. He was brought up as a starter, and then all we ever heard was how fantastic he is. And then the Yankees put him in a muddy inning, in an awful situation. That's not how you develop pitchers.
Yeah.
So this is not this is not an attack on Clark Schmidt at all. Clark Schmidt is one of our top pitching prospects, but I just know the way this is going. The Yankees don't trust him. And then last year, they didn't trust him. Again, they were kind of putting him in bullpen roles, and he was struggling in these bullpen roles. He's not a bullpen pitcher.
Hurt. He was hurt.
And then he
last
got hurt, but then he got hurt. Yeah, so then he got hurt. So now his value is really kind of deteriorating. I don't think the Yankees are going to trust him as a starter. And he's not a good reliever. He's kind of struggling in these relief roles. I just don't trust the way the Yankees develop their pitchers. In a very similar route as they did with Davey Garcia. Instead of showing faith in these guys, they're putting them in scenarios which are no-win. That Davey Garcia scenario was a no-win. He was coming in for 1 inning. So what if he pitched an immaculate inning? What if that scenario he pitched an immaculate inning where it was 9 strikes, 3 strikeouts? He was still going out afterwards in that playoff game. So what kind of sense does that make? It's a no-win scenario for him, and then he's never recovered from that. And the same logic, I think the same thing is applying to Clark Schmidt, because all we heard was everybody talking about Clark Schmidt, like Chance Adams. And then the Yankees have not really developed Schmidt. They throw him in bullpen scenarios. It's not worked. I don't trust Aaron Boone as the manager to get the most out of him, or the organization to get the most out of him. So what I say is trade him while we're still going to get some value, because I do not want another Clint Frazier scenario where we just keep holding until we just have to end up just releasing him. That's just kind of sad. So, yeah, 4, Clark Schmidt.
All right, Rob, your turn.
Keeping it with the pitcher theme, Jordan Montgomery. I think
oh, boy.
I think now
bringing up the controversy.
This one might be a little controversial. I think now would be a good time to trade him. He's got 2 years of control left. He's another player that you're probably not gonna give big money to when he hits the open market. He's gonna be, I think, going into his age 31 season when he hits free agency, which is a good, not a terrible age, but you're probably not going to give him that 5-year deal, something around there. And he's coming off of a really good year, and we have a lot of pitch. And I know you just say we don't develop pitchers very well, but the Yankees do have a lot of young arms in their system that are ready to come up within the next year or so. So, also, I really want to sign Rodon in free agency from Chicago. I like him a lot, and I do think that we were looking at starters. If we were willing to give Verlander $25 million, that tells me that we were probably going to go after a starting pitcher in free agency. And Montgomery could be a guy that would get you a decent return. He's healthy. He came back from Tommy John this year. We came back last year, but you saw the second year, he was back to himself. He looked like his rookie season. And he was fine. He was looking like a number 2, and that's what Cashman said about him. He was looking like a number 2 starter at times. Now, would I trade him? Probably not. But
value-wise, it does make sense.
Value-wise, he might not be higher than he is right now. 2 years left to control, a solid lefty arm.
And I think to your point, the bounce back after the Tommy John, he's already. You've already seen that he has the mental and physical ability to overcome injuries and bumps in the road in his career. He can I still remember one of his first rough outings. And they were asking a reporter was asking if he was in sync with the catcher, and his answer was perfect. It was the ball's in my hand. It's my job. And he really just, for a rookie to take it on his shoulders like that, really impressed me. And that's why I've been such a big fan of his, because you gotta have to have heavy shoulders when you're playing in New York. And I think Montgomery has that. He has a lot.
He's been very like quiet, calm, collected, and he's got like the perfect mentality to play here, because he's just kind of like
LeMahieu. He's just he just goes with the flow and just does his job.
But again, I look at more so if you're not going to re-sign the guy, you might as well try to get something.
This would be the time to move. Yeah, I agree.
Plus, you still have I hate him, but Domingo Germán's still here. Luis Gil is basically ready, and there's just so many other arms that are coming up the pipeline that are like ready.
Michael King would be a good.
I'd keep him in the bullpen.
For him.
Michael King needs to stay in the bullpen. He was electric
Yeah.
out of the
That's
bullpen. He needs to
terrific.
stay there. That sinker, that curveball, disgusting. He needs to stay where he is in the bullpen.
Well,
I
no,
love
well,
Luis Gil.
to
Gil
go, to
is
go back to my,
unstoppable.
well, that went back to, the argument with Chapman. You're moving everybody up the rank, and you still have, legitimate arms to put in that, in the bullpen roles to give you length. Luis Gil, Michael King, just to name two off, right away. So, the pitching staff, as much as we think it's not the strongest, it's not the sexiest names in the game, outside of Cole, but they do hold their own. The pitchers do very well. Just think of how those pitchers were pitching this past year. If the bats were playing, were hitting to their ability, what this team could have done. Everybody's speaking. A lot of people, they think it's all about pitching. Well, when half of your lineup isn't even hitting 220, the pitchers can only do so much. They can't, obviously now there's with the new universal DH, even in the National League, the pitchers can't help themselves anymore, at the plate. And so, you need the arms in the bullpen. I don't think were really as disappointing as we think they were. They had hiccups. Of course they did. They're human. They're not robots. But the pitching staff, I don't think, was the overall problem. It really was the offense. They're the ones that let the fans down this past year.
Oh yeah, 1,000%.
All right, so my number 4 is Aaron Hicks. And given his injury history, I think he has a very movable contract. We do have outfield depth that could absorb the loss of him, so we don't necessarily need to jump for a free agent for the outfield.
Brett Gardner.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. He is a free agent. I keep forgetting that part of it. But you have, because we all know he's coming back. So we're just going to consider him still on the roster. But
I'm going to consider him on the roster until he's actually retired. Until he's proven that he's retired, he will always be on the Yankee roster as well.
Exactly. But back to Hicks, I think with the contract that's movable, when he is healthy, he is a very solid defensive player. He's got a good arm from the outfield. Switch hitter. I think a team would want to jump on that, especially in the National League. I think would take a bite at somebody like Hicks. So that was my number 4. Especially if we're going to have Dominguez in the pipeline coming up really quick. I think he's coming a little quicker than we think. And so that, the outfield positions are becoming, movable. All right, Donald, number 5.
Tats, me and you are on the same wavelength. So my number 5, who I want traded, very clear, Aaron Hicks. Who I think will be traded will be Luke Voigt. But I want it to be Aaron Hicks because for the reasons you stated. I would trade Aaron Hicks for medium Pepsi for Giants that are listening. And to be honest, I think that a set of golf clubs has more value to baseball players than Aaron Hicks. So I'm not quite sure what you could get for him because he's always hurt and his range is shot. Yeah, I mean, listen, you can't trust him. How can you trust him to play any more than 50 games a year, if that? Brian Cashman is absolutely obsessed with this guy. And so is the Yankees front office in terms of the advanced statisticians or whatever. They love their analytics guys. For some reason, I don't know what analytics stat that they love. I'll need to really explore that. But they love him, and I don't know why. They love the fact he's a switch hitter, but the thing is, not very good from the left side. In fact, he's terrible from the left side. So what good is he as a switch hitter if he's terrible from one side of the plate, like completely unusable from one side of the plate? His power is declining, so he doesn't really provide much power. All he is a walk guy. I think you can find that for cheaper than $10 million. So if the Yankees could trade him for a packet of Utz potato chips and a medium Pepsi, I would
But if you take
be
the name
much
off,
happier because he gives me no pleasure. I can't stand watching him. I don't like him, and I hate his mentality. And he is everything that is wrong with the New York Yankees. Please trade him for a medium Pepsi. Thank you.
To use Rob's argument with me on the Hall of Fame for Alex Rodriguez, if you take Aaron Hicks's name off of the paper, and you're gonna get a player that's got strong defense, switch hitter, center fielder making only $10 million a year with only a year or two left. If you're just looking at that play without knowing who it was, a lot of teams would jump on that. So I think that's something that's got to be taken into account. $10 million for a center fielder, even if you're signing a defensive replacement, $10 million is not a lot of money.
Yeah, but here's the problem, man.
He hasn't played.
Exactly. The other teams' front offices see exactly the same as what Yankee fans see. In fact, they see more than what the Yankee fans see. So I don't think his value is as high as you think, man. Because
I don't think his value is high at all. But I'm still going to talk him up and get him out of here.
He's not going to get traded because of everything that you just mentioned, Donald. The fact that the Yankees love him and he's a switch.
Well, he just wanted Cashman.
Because Cashman traded a backup catcher for him, and it took a little while, but Cashman won that trade because Aaron Hicks, for a little bit, was looking like an absolute steal because he was hitting and he was playing great defense and he was running the bases well and he was drawing a ton of walks. And then he got hurt again and again and again, and you got him for a really good contract because the player that he is when healthy is worth more than $10 million that he's never healthy.
Yeah.
But I think if they're actually smart and give Estevan Florial a chance and they use his outfield the way it needs to be used, where Stanton plays and you can use Gallo in center, you don't need Aaron Hicks to play every day, which would keep him on the roster from whenever the season starts till October, assuming we get there, which we probably will if there's an expanded playoffs. That's another conversation. So they can use him in different ways this year, which will keep him healthy. It's just that you don't know if he will. And teams would trade for him if he was healthy every year. He'd be probably at the top of the list of major league ready players, aside from Judge, maybe, that you're going to want to trade for. But it's just, don't know. It's such an uncertainty with him. He could play 10 games in a row and then stub a toe and be out for a month. You just don't know with Aaron Hicks.
Well, yeah, exactly. And that's the way my mindset is that it's kind of similar to other scenarios where what would he be best at? That would be as a fourth outfielder, okay? But his skill set as a fourth outfielder is not something that I actually need from a fourth outfielder. For a fourth outfielder, I need supreme defense. I need speed. Something a little bit different. Aaron Hicks doesn't provide that. His range is declining. He's not really that great defensively anymore. Plus, you can't rely on him to be healthy to be a fourth outfielder. So then, does he provide speed? No. So what is he going to provide? He'll provide walks. And I think he's the type of guy who needs 150, 200 at-bats just to get into a rhythm in order to start popping some out of the yard. So I don't see him being a platoon player. So that's where if you trade him and you have Florial as a platoon fourth option where you can play left field, you can play right field, you can definitely play center field, that would be a much more preferable option. And then the Yankees can then go and then acquire a proper center fielder who you trust is going to play at minimum 120, 130 games every single year. That's what you need. You need to move on. You need to get younger at center field and have a platoon with him and Florial. That's what I think.
Yep. All right, Rob, you're number 5.
He's probably going to show up on a list later in the week. I'm kind of going to contradict myself here, but I have Anthony Volpe. I think you trade him now, his value has been through the roof after last year. 294, 423 on base, 27 homers, 86 ribbies in the minor leagues. He's only been in single A. He's not been above that yet. I know he's probably the future shortstop of this team, but you're trying to win a World Series right now, you can get a Matt Olson, or I would take Brian Reynolds. But if you can get a absolute star for Anthony Volpe, you have to do it right now, especially because you have so many shortstops in the system. Peraza is going to be fine there. Cabrera can do the job. We just signed Arias, and he'll be ready within 3-4 years, maybe. There's so much uncertainty with prospects, and I love Volpe, and I would love for him to be the shortstop here forever. But if you tell me the Yankees could get Brian Reynolds in a trade that starts with Anthony Volpe and then other pieces, you do that trade.
Turn down.
Yeah, you do that trade every time, because Reynolds helps you win right now and probably puts you at the top of the contenders list in the American League. If you get Reynolds and then we sign a good shortstop and we get a first baseman like Freeman, you're talking about an elite team up and down the roster. You really can't find a hole on this team. And I'm sure Volpe will be great. But if he doesn't help you win right now, and a guy like Reynolds or Olsen can, you kind of have to jump on that, because the World Championship window, as much as the Yankees don't want to admit it, is closing with this group. And if you don't win within the next couple of years, it's going to look as a complete failure after what we went through, after what we saw in 2017 as the start of this whole thing. It's closing. This is already the 5th year that we're going into of this championship window. We haven't gotten to where we want to go.
Yeah,
so
the surprise season of 2017 started the clock early on Cashman.
Right.
You thought, it was, 2018 was going to start the championship clock. Even though amongst fans, the clock never stops running. But really, when it came to the development of the talent, 2017 took a lot of people by surprise, and we've fallen short every season. And every season, it seems to be getting just a little bit worse. So yeah, that window is closing very quick. And if you can make a pretty much like what the LA Rams did, they stocked up on the superstars. They sacrificed their future to put a championship on the shelf.
It worked for the Yankees in 09.
Huh?
It worked for the Yankees in 09.
Yeah, exactly. Why can't it happen again? All right, my number 5, I was really stuck between 2 players, and I went with Voit over Sanchez. And I chose Voit because of the universal DH. I think his attitude is more sour than Sanchez. And I think it's also his ability to still be able to be a solid first baseman, I think would be very enticing to some teams. And you can get, not top guys, but you can get some mid-level guys that you could develop into better players for a player like Voit over a player like Sanchez. So that's why Voit ended up being my number 5.
Plus, your cat's called Kraken.
Well, that had nothing to do with it.
Bias. No, I to be honest,
the reason I didn't go with Sanchez is because the catcher's market is so tough. I can't see trading the guy without having a legitimate backup plan. When you get a guy like Voit, you have Rizzo and Freeman available on the market. There are trade options with the A's. So we always say the catchers are that's such a hard position to fill. And as bad as Gary is, and at least we know what we got, even if it's not anything. So
you don't seem too sure of yourself with this one, right?
No, I really wasn't sure. This one, I was, late last night when I finally was able to come to my number 5 choice, because it really was something I was mulling around in my head all day. So I'm not, that's what I say. It could have been a tie for my 5th, but Voit is more tradable than Sanchez, so I went with Voit.
Oh, he 100% is. And to be honest, Voit is probably the most obvious candidate. I think if we were to go with the most obvious trade candidates right now, I think we could all agree that number 1 is Luke Voit, because Brian Cashman has already basically admitted by bringing in Rizzo that he didn't really fully trust Luke Voit. Luke Voit's hurt all the time. and his, you know, he's a good clubhouse guy, but I think when he started saying how much he's done for this organization, that rubbed me, and I think it rubbed Brian Cashman, it rubbed the front office the wrong way, because he's not really done that much for the organization. He was just a very productive hitter. That doesn't actually, I think that would maybe mean more in other teams, but this is the Yankees. Basically, you don't earn anything.
You know, and what's sad is
until you put a ring on your finger, you're not really done anything as a Yankee. So you can't really say I've done this much for the organization. You really haven't. It's not like he was doing all this stuff for charity and for New York and blah blah blah. He's just been a good, solid ball player. I'm sorry, it doesn't mean that the Yankees owe you a lifetime contract. I think Brian Cashman's ready to move on from him. He's just such an obvious candidate that I looked at other guys. But yeah.
And I don't want to dismiss, the 2020 season with Boyd. Just like we don't dismiss, what was it, 2019 with Gary. They were highly productive in those seasons. But like you referenced, just his attitude towards, the organization, and with that chip on his shoulder, like like he was owed something. You haven't built up yet that stock yet. You don't have the credits. You don't have the bank account to have that type of attitude.
Yeah, the optics as well, when he was doing this Stone Cold Steve Austin celebration when the Yankees were losing a game and then he hit a ninth inning meaningless home run. That rubbed me the wrong way too. It just kind of looked like he was continually trying to make a point. After Rizzo was brought in, it looked like his mentality wasn't, right, let me do my best for the Yankees. Let me do my best to try.
But at first it worked.
Like, his mentality looked a bit more like, look at me. I'm the guy you should be choosing. I didn't like that. Rob, what are you thinking?
I said it. This is my first pick. He needs to go. Like, you technically you could roll with him at first base next year, assuming he's healthy. If you can look into the future, right, and you had a crystal ball and said Luke Voigt's going to be healthy throughout 2022, you're going to get close to maybe even an all-star caliber player. He's that good offensively, and his defense is not terrible, like I said, to a point where you're like, no, he can't play first base for you. It's just when you compare him to the likes of Rizzo and Freeman and Olsen, who are the other three options out there, you're like, Luke Voigt's terrible. That's when you're comparing him to those players, yeah. But Voigt was perfectly fine for us when we got him in 2018. 2019, when he played, he was fine. Then 2020, he was one of the best players in baseball, or at least he was our best player. So it was just, what he can do, but it's just like the writing was on the wall with the way he was acting last year after the Rizzo trade, the uncertainty with his health. It's much like Aaron Hicks. And then now with the rumors about pursuing Freeman and the trade rumors with Olsen, you just see that he was almost
the writing was on the wall.
Yeah, you just see that he's going to be moved eventually. But if they don't sign a player or trade for a first baseman, he's probably going to be here and be our first baseman, which isn't the worst thing in the world, but it doesn't – you're not saying that you improved your roster when you tell me that we're getting a healthy Luke Voigt, because he breaks down kind of easily, which sucks because he's very capable of being a deadly hitter in this lineup. Deadly.
Didn't Cashman say even at the trade deadline last year, he did receive phone calls for Voigt, but just they weren't able to come to any terms?
No, a trade fell through, I think, or they were very close to trading him to Milwaukee, I think. He was almost traded, came very close to being traded.
So that's why I expected it'll happen in the offseason. Yeah. I'm sure.
And that's what started, a lot of the talks about him, with him souring. But, a lot of these players, they did it to themselves, but let's not ignore the fact that the Yankees completely and year after year mishandled their roster. And they don't put people in the positions that they're going to be successful in. They put them in the positions that the optics say this is where they should be. Mm-hmm. And it's not a good look for the Yankees overall, from Cashman, from Howell all the way down. And having a guy like Bourne at the helm in the dugout, that's not, that's not somebody that's going to inspire a player to be better.
Exactly. If you guys read the Kevin Kernan article on Ball 9, kind of went through the organization, the problems within the organization. I do recommend checking that out. I think you could probably go through
Kevin Kiernan from Ball 9 is one of the best sports writers out there. Absolutely.
That's right. And he kind of went through those kind of problems where the Yankees are their best people in a position to succeed. And so that's why I'm really interested to see how the Yankees were going to approach the coaching staff changes. Even though I had to deal with the fact that Aaron Boone signed a lifetime contract, I was thinking, okay, well, what are the other coaching staff changes? And it just looked like more of the same. It just looked like the Yankees are doubling down on this analytics thing. I think the Yankees have to make some fundamental changes to how they're approaching prospect development and the front office, and I don't think they're doing it. So a lot of my trade ideas is mostly getting guys out before the values completely collapse.
Yeah, we can't afford that. They can't afford to keep going the Chance Adams route. The player that Rod brought up earlier. That's what's been, they can't keep doing that. So they got to make the moves while they can, and while there is still while you can get something for them. We'll see. And I'm more curious to see what type of comments we get on this, because this was a good discussion. I want to we want to hear your ideas. Who do you think should be traded? Who do you disagree with the player that we brought up today? Just give us your thoughts on it. I'm sure Spencer is going to be on our Twitter feed later with some good commentary, because he does. He's awesome. So thank you, Spencer,
shout out to Spencer
for helping out and giving us the feedback. And just remember, like, share, comment, and subscribe. Check out our social media in the description. And just remember, wear your pinstripes with pride and play hard.